What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and if you've seen the initial announcements about the upcoming season in Rainbow Six Siege, you may have noticed that there are huge changes coming to the damage drop-off and health systems that will fundamentally rework how the guns work in the game. I've spoken about the new health system in the past, but beyond that, the new long-range damage is changing for almost every single weapon class in the game, and as always, I'm here to break these changes down for you and to summarize what this will mean in practice. Thank you once again to Alienware and Nvidia for sponsoring the video, and with that, let's get stuck in. In terms of damage and health, there are two separate changes coming to the game at once. The armor and health change I already covered in the past video, link in the top right hand corner now and coming up in the end card if you want to see those effects explained separately, and in addition to that, newly standardized damage drop-off curves for almost all weapons in the game. And I'm saying standardized with a couple of big fat asterisks here, because with just a little bit of testing I have already managed to uncover some apparent flaws in the implementation of the devs' plans. So instead of being able to jump straight to the conclusion of which guns will be receiving buffs and which nerfs, we will first have to understand everything that is wrong with the system as it currently stands on the test server. Here is the relevant section of the preseason designer notes, and let me say this first of all, a star for effort here. This section nicely explains what is changing and why, and it even comes with a lovely little table to give you all the data you need. And that looks great, right? In theory, I wouldn't even have to do any testing at all, but of course, all is not as simple as it looks. The first little issue here I want to point out is that the second bullet point talks about how the devs have unified the damage drop-off for silencers to 15%. But damage drop-off refers to the loss of damage potential across increasing distances, so the use of the term here is a little confusing, and I think what they simply meant to say was damage reduction. A couple of paragraphs down and the devs talk about the exceptions, so the new unified drop-off will not apply to pistols, secondary SMGs and regular shotguns, and Kali CSRX because of course that gun has had its damage specifically chosen to make it a one-hit kill weapon against level 1 armors at all ranges. But even more confusing than that is the slug shotgun row in the table, because apparently the damage drop-off curve for these weapons starts at 25 meters and also ends at 25 meters. Just an instant 30% loss of damage, apparently. Except that is of course also a mistake, and with a little bit of testing I was able to confirm that this is really meant to say 35 meters, so basically the same as assault rifles. But that's not all here. Everyone who has played Rainbow Six for a while now will know that the very first slug shotgun ever introduced into the game was of course the double-barreled BOSG .12.2 used by Vigil and Dokkaebi. When these notes say slug shotguns, they only mean the ACS and TCSG, not the BOSG, which keeps its old drop-off curve of 10 to 18 meters, and so we add it to the list of exceptions. Interestingly, the table also tells us that with the new season, the drop-off curves for the LMGs and DMRs is going to start at 30 meters instead of the 25 meters that we've had for years now. I tested this and I can confirm that the information is accurate. LMGs and DMRs will be receiving a mini buff across the board in the form of a slightly greater reach. The title of the paragraph is Damage Drop-Off and Silencers, which is great, but how about we also add the extended barrel, maybe? The extended barrel is only available on SMGs and rifles, and in all of my tests, this attachment raised the minimum damage modifier from 60% to 80% for both of those weapon classes. But for all of the talk about streamlining hidden passive abilities, they apparently forgot that Sam Fisher's SC3000K launched with a hidden passive where the extended barrel not only raises the minimum damage, but for whatever reason, for this specific gun and only this specific gun, the extended barrel also pushes the last drop-off distance from 35 to 40 meters, but the modifier is still 80%, so at least that is consistent. And okay, all of these things are relatively minor, some wording issues here, a few forgotten details there, no big deal really. But a couple of final questions I would have for the devs are, How sure are you really about your suppressed damage drop-off? Are you certain that it has been standardized? And those, of course, are rhetorical questions. I tested it, and God knows what is going on with suppressors, but there is no consistency in how they work at all. Well, there's some consistency, but with many issues. According to these notes, suppressor damage has been unified to a consistent 15% reduction, and let me start off with the positive here. For the weapon groups that are getting new damage drop-off curves, the close-range damage reduction of suppressors seems to work. I tested the TCSG, ALDA, L85, FMG9, R4C and AR33, and for all of those weapons, the close-range damage worked perfectly as expected. Baseline damage times 0.85 rounded down. But here's the first issue. For weapons that are not getting new unified drop-off curves, the suppressor has not been adjusted and does not conform to the new 15% drop-off rule at all. Here's the PMM pistol, and as you can see, the close-range suppressor modifier is 0.918, and the long range is 0.793. So for pistols, machine pistols and shotguns, the suppressor damage will remain jumbled and confusing. Beyond that, all of my tests confirmed that at minimum damage range, the suppressor is inconsistent even for the weapon classes that are getting standardized drop-off curves. What we would expect, given the preseason designer notes, is that suppressed damage at range is base damage of the gun times minimum damage modifier times suppressor modifier rounded down to the nearest whole number. So for example, for the FMG9, that would be 34 times 0.6 times 0.85 rounded down equals 17. But in my practical tests, the gun did 18 points of damage, so the suppressor is stronger than expected and the damage reduction is only 10% instead of 15. For all other weapons that I chose to test, TCSG, ALDA, L85, R4C and AR33, the suppressed damage on the test server is 2 to 3 points lower than the calculation tells us it should have been, and it isn't even consistent because for these we get modifiers between 23 and 26%. In conclusion, while the suppressor does appear to reduce the close-range damage for some of the weapon classes by a standardized 15% rounded down, at long range, all bets are off, and for pistols, machine pistols and shotguns, the new rules don't even apply at short range. Like I said right in the beginning, when it comes to the info in the patch notes, specifically for this section, A star for effort, but that's probably a D for execution, and I'm being generous here. This video was supposed to be simple, just a straightforward analysis of the new weapon drop-off, and yet here we are. Since this is only week 1 of the test server, there is a chance that suppressors will be tweaked before the launch of the new season, so I will not be discussing them today. It would be a complete waste of time to test the real damage reduction for every single weapon, only for everything to change again in 2 weeks' time. What we can do though is check the new drop-off without suppressors, and of course that combines with the new number of shots to kill for many weapons due to the new health system, so let me highlight to you what all of that will mean. Now, over the last few episodes, I've been telling you about the new NVIDIA Reflex and DLSS graphics systems available in Rainbow Six Siege and how they help you to get the best possible performance out of your PC. But at the end of the day, there is always a potential bottleneck that can introduce latency into your gaming experience, and that is your monitor. If your monitor is only refreshing once every 16.6 milliseconds, you're essentially blind as to what is happening in the game in between. And that is why I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to be testing out the Alienware 2521H 360Hz esports monitor over the last few months. 360Hz is currently the fastest available refresh rate in the world and means that there are only 2.7 milliseconds between each frame. Combine this with the monitor's ultra-fast 1 millisecond response time IPS panel that delivers 99% sRGB color coverage, and you have a monitor that is not only hand-tuned for esports, but also offers an incredibly vibrant and smooth gaming experience. If you want to minimize your system latency while gaming, you need a high-performance monitor to deliver high frame rates, and right now there is no faster option than the Alienware 2521H. It's performed really well for me, and if you're looking to upgrade your setup, do check it out. A massive amount of maths went into this damage analysis, and if you're interested, the full info will be uploaded to my spreadsheet, link in the description, but for now, let me take you straight to the results summary. First, here are the effects of just the new damage drop-off. Let's forget about the new health system for 2 seconds. As you can see, the new damage drop-off means that SMGs across the board are receiving pretty considerable nerfs, and the same is pretty much true for most other weapons as well, but the TCSG, ACS, DMRs, LMGs and Lions V308 also all get to benefit from later damage drop-off, which results in the interesting pattern where we have first a buff at reasonably long range, but then a nerf at very long range. The only weapons that are receiving outright buffs are the Cammers, 417 and SR25, the 556XI, M762, AK-12, C7E and 416C. If we look at the damage per second change, the heat map looks identical because of course it is the changing damage that is influencing the change in DPS. In terms of shots to kill and time to kill, like I mentioned, my sheet will contain the full breakdown of all weapons at all ranges against all types of armor and impact locations, but let's stick to a summary here. These tables show the difference in shots to kill, so a negative number means that after the patch you will need less hits, a positive number means more. Obviously, at short range there is no change, but at long range we can see that the damage changes translate across quite consistently, and it's the SMGs that are getting hit with the hardest nerfs, especially the weaker SMGs such as the Vector and P90, and a handful of rifles are getting buffs, particularly Jaeger's 416C, Jackal's C7E, Sophia's M762 and Ace and Fuse's AK-12. Adding in the effects of the new health system I explained in my previous video, link in the end card soon, you can see that fundamentally not that much changes. At long range, it's pretty much the same guns that are getting the biggest nerfs and buffs. But at least the P90 ends up with a bit of a close range buff to partially counterbalance how weak this gun will be at 28 meters and onwards soon. All in all, I think the easiest way to summarize the coming update is that many weapons will need one more or one less bullet here and there, depending on distance, target armor class, and strike location, but overall, the already slightly weaker SMGs are going to become even weaker at longer ranges compared to all other weapon classes, with some needing up to 3 or even 4 more shots than before. So there it is, hopefully the mess that the suppressors are causing will get sorted before launch, and maybe I can come back then and figure out some new recommendations for which guns would do well with suppressors and which would not. Until then, many thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.